if you want me, oh, there it goes. It works.
Yeah. Okay. Everyone sees the slides.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, welcome everyone to the first Idea Showcase of 2026. Really appreciate everyone being here. We have at least some new folks to these sessions, so excited for that. As always, we're going to start off with a few updates for the network, going over upcoming events and publications and announcements. So, hand over to Kathy.
Sure. That was our mission. We
Yeah,
just start
sorry.
out, since we have a lot of people that are, new and not always here, we always start out with the mission statement, and we're going to be sharing some sample slides that you can use with talking points about NNIP in the next couple of days. Next. Thanks very much to Cole and Cheryl Knott, who's here. We will be this afternoon launching the technical affinity group on the forum. So this is really to give people a space to ask about coding or web design or other topics that we expect will get like a little more in the weeds. And we will be sending that announcement out on the forum, and some of you will be. I'm also sending some individual emails out to prompt people to join. So we'd love to have you join and spread the word for your colleagues. It is open to everyone. Yep. We would love to have a good set of impact award applications. If you have an idea, please, we're happy also to talk with you ahead of time if you have an idea and want us to give feedback on it. We have a great review committee this year with our funders from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and Casey, and a new friend from Kyla from the Knight Foundation that some of you met during the Charlotte meeting. So again, this is not, we did say on the other grant program, we are not able to talk to people one-on-one, but on this award, we would love to hear from you, and for you to let us know if you're planning on applying. On March 11th, formerly known as the GitHub Python webinar, Reducing Technical Debt. So Jordan from Columbus, this was an idea that emerged during the camp sessions, but didn't get held in Charlotte. This is really about the sort of how do you foster collaborative small data teams with an open source development practice. So it's more about the process of organizing your programming work. It is best for people who are doing coding. And we will send an updated title and description, whether it's this or something like this, in the next couple of days. And we have about 3 weeks, so there's time for people to either unregister if this isn't what they want, or to register. And then you should all have received the save the date for the partners meeting in New Orleans. We're still working on the agenda, but we expect it'll be a big draw for the city and the amazing work the data center does. And we'll be sending out registration in the next week or two with hotel information, and we'll be prompting you to do all of that earlier than usual, since we ran out of rooms in Charlotte, which caused problems at the last minute. You can just put them all up, Cole. These were supposed to be indented. They didn't indent, but we are working on, based on building off of the session from Charlotte on building data capacity, a series of publications, which is the next 3, which is a framing page Katie, Richard, and I are working on, the help desk review of practices. You saw a draft already from Cole, and a data-days guide with our friend Jay Dev. So and then there'll be others in the series as we go along to really document a lot of what we know. Cole's working on a blog about AI and NNIP to again, take a snapshot of where we are as a network now. And there should be one more. Oh, yep. And Leah and our colleague Lizzie authored a blog on the Atlanta State of Latinos report. So that we'll be sending announcements out over the forum when those are out and about. And you can also plug to follow us on LinkedIn, which I'll, Leah, if you could put that, we'll put that link in the, there we go. And Anthony's ready to move. And we'll put that LinkedIn, NNIP LinkedIn in the comment, in the chat sometime in the next few minutes. So that's all of our updates. If you do have ideas for the New Orleans meeting, yeah, just a plug. Thank you for all of those you who filled out the NNIP interest survey. We'll be sending those results soon. But if you have ideas, just drop us a note. We'd be happy to hear about them while the agenda is wide open at this point. All right, Cole, turned over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. So yes, thank you to today's speakers. Our first will be Adam Poor from WarpC in Columbus, going over their WarpC Insights platform, which is a presentation that has been in the works going back to the partners meeting. So I'm excited to hear about it more. Next, we'll have two partners from Seattle, Sarah J. Sanford and Blaine Amson. And Blaine, I believe this is your first interaction in this capacity with the network. So welcome. And they'll be talking about the work they've done with data on the disability community in King County, Seattle. And then finally, we'll have Francisco Richter from the Center on Poverty and Community Development at Case Western in Cleveland. And she'll be talking about the work that they're doing with administrative data, in particular, identifying and addressing bias in integrated administrative data. So with that, I will stop sharing and turn it over to Adam.
All right. Well, thank you, Cole. Just a sec. Okay. Hopefully you all can see my slides.
A good title.
All right, good. And let me clean up my window a little bit. You know, I've been using Zoom for years now, and I still have to refigure it out every time. All right. Anyway, so yes, I'd love to talk to you all a little bit about our WarpC Insights platform today. This is something my boss, Dave Dixon, sort of envisioned shortly after he started at WarpC in 2023. We really kicked it off in 2024 and launched it, I think, early last year, maybe in February of 2025. So it's still kind of a new thing, but we're pretty proud of it already. Dig in. All right. So first of all, it might look like a dashboard if you were to go there. I'll share a link to it later. But it's not exactly a dashboard. We like to think of it more like a newspaper. So if you're only seeing kind of a narrow view of it here, but it's actually 3 tiles wide normally on a big screen. And so it kind of reads like a newspaper format where you have some sort of visual graphic followed by a headline, followed by some commentary. And the idea is that we wanted to put more emphasis on the insights that we can take away from the data that we commonly work with for the benefit of primarily of elected officials and staff of our member governments. So we're a regional council of governments. And so we are always trying to serve those folks. Let's see. I'll talk more about, I'll get into more detail in just a minute, but I wanted to mention another key thing here is that we have tailored headlines and tailored commentary for all of our regional level data and county level data. So if you were a representative of Delaware County, Ohio, for example, you could go find the stories about your county and know that the headlines and commentary are tailored specifically to Delaware County. The visualizations are tailored in all cases, including the community level data, which I'll talk more about in a moment. All right. So why do we do this? Let me set the stage a little bit. A lot of our work goes into supporting the Metropolitan Transportation Plan and other transportation planning needs. So we work with a lot of data, and much of it could be useful to decision makers, demographic data, socioeconomic data, stuff like that. But often we're working with it more for internal purposes. Some of it we end up publishing it on our various repositories, but it's not always easy to find. Some of it is only available by request. And most of the time, unless we produced a specific report about something, that data is not accompanied by any sort of explanation. It's maybe has some metadata describing it, but that's about it. So we understood that was a limitation. We have the attention of all of our member governments and presumably all of the local governments in Central Ohio, at least are aware of what we're doing. But our data interests, as I mentioned, are somewhat narrow, mostly focused on transportation planning, although we do have tendrils into other things as well. There are many other institutions in the region that are dealing with other sources of data, childcare, for example. That we don't get into that very much directly, but we wanted to try and find a way to spotlight some of the other great data that organizations are working with. And then we also recognize that different classes of data users have different needs. And so rather than just dumping the data on our website somewhere, we wanted to try and present it at a variety of levels that are accessible to different classes of users. So those were some of the thoughts we had going into this. As you're navigating around the platform, I thought about doing a live demo, but this seemed less risky. As you're navigating around the platform, you'll notice that users can select your geography level of interest. So region is kind of a general term. Sometimes it refers to the Columbus Metro. Sometimes it refers to the Morpsey 15 county region of interest. It just depends on the specific story or tile. Or counties we represent, or we have a 15 county area of interest. So we actually have data for all 15 counties, regardless of whether they're our members or not. And then for communities, we have tiles for all of our member communities. We wanted to make this a service that seemed kind of special to our members. However, the underlying data is available for all communities in Central Ohio, and there's a way to get at that. Once you've selected the geography level, you can choose your geography of interest. So right now you're seeing some tiles from Franklin County. And there's a couple other navigation features that are kind of cool. There's this search up here, which lets you search in any of these things here: headline, commentary, category, or place, geography. Or you can narrow it to just a subset of those things. So it's really pretty good at helping you find exactly what you're looking for. One thing that's not shown here is that as you navigate through the app, it will capture the state of the app in the URL. So you can copy the URL and share it with people, and they'll see what you are seeing. Eventually, we will break down the content into a set of categories. We haven't done that yet just because the number of tiles is kind of small still, so there wasn't really a need for it. Don't worry, I'll bring us back out of the weeds. This is what a specific tile or story looks like. So as I mentioned, there's a static data visualization that's kind of the key element of the tile. Then there's a headline that, at least for the region and county level, a subject matter expert has looked at that data visualization for that geography and said, okay, what's the key takeaway that we want people to get from this? And they write that as a headline. And then they further elaborate in a short commentary. For the community level tiles, we don't have the capacity to generate unique content for each of those communities. So we have a kind of a generic headline and commentary that applies to communities broadly in the region. Let's see. Down at the bottom here, you see there's several buttons. And the idea here is for people who are very interested in this content, to get them to more information. So underlying each of these tiles is a featured data product. Right now, those tend to be Morpseys. In the future, we hope to bring in external partner content as well. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. The middle button, it goes to a publication grade graphic. I'll talk more about that in a minute. And then the button over on the right links to all the technical details. One thing that's not included yet is we hope to eventually add a link to additional commentary, so that basically kind of a fact sheet. You would see visualizations, commentary for a whole set of geographies, and it would go into more detail. So almost like a little report. If you were to click through to the featured data products, this is kind of typical of what you would see. It could be anything or nearly anything that has a URL. Most of the content tends to link to ArcGIS dashboards, but it could be a static image, a spreadsheet, whatever. The idea is we don't want this to be the native place where you find the data. We want to feature data that already exists. So we wanted to keep this really flexible. This underlying data, the featured data products, include all available data, not just the data from MORPS's member communities. So the member communities get spotlighted by tiles, but the data is still available. And I think am I running out of time already? Okay. And then, as I mentioned, in the future, we're hoping to pull content from our external partners as well. If you click the option for publication grade graphics, you get two options, either a high resolution raster or a scalable SVG image. Unfortunately, it's a little bit clunky to get SVGs into Microsoft products, so we had to create this kind of clunky interface with instructions to explain to people how to do that. But it's pretty easy just to grab a PNG and put that in your document. For many of our data products, you can also get the data in Excel chart format by clicking on that technical details link, which is the next thing I'm going to talk about. All right. So the technical details link points to a repository of some kind, and that could be nearly anything, any sort of repository that has a URL. Most of our repositories are GitHub repositories. Excuse me. But it could be a SharePoint folder or a Dropbox folder, whatever. And the key here is this contains all of the underlying information that was used in the production of that data product. So the raw data, metadata, code, documentation, all that stuff. We've developed kind of our own standard for packaging this stuff up called a MORPS's Insights Data Kit, which specifies the minimum content that should be included and also some standards that should be used. We've been working with frictionless standards, which are fantastic. If you haven't worked with them, I would love to do a presentation on those sometime. Jordan Inskeep will touch on those in his presentation in a few weeks. And in the future, we hope to package all of this together using the frictionless data package format to make it even a little bit tighter still. These technical details don't have to comply with this standard. It makes it easier for us. All right, I just have a couple more slides. Wanted to talk about some design considerations that went into this. The kind of overriding concern was no new data and no new tools. We wanted to we didn't want it to invest in a lot of new stuff. We just wanted to make content that we were frequently working with more available. Turns out was a pretty big constraint, especially when you get down to some of these other bullets, like having efficient workflows, because we couldn't develop a lot of tooling to make things more efficient, but we made it work. We wanted this to be a perk for member governments, which is why the communities tiles only include member governments. We wanted to include only data that was likely to be reliably updated so that people could come back to this resource and always expect to find the latest and greatest of what they're used to finding here. We're trying to update these tiles once a year as relevant. Some things have a longer cycle than that, but most things are updated annually. So we wanted to make sure that was very efficient. And we wanted to, because we're collecting content from subject matter experts, we wanted to make gathering that information very efficient and a low burden for them as well. So what all of this boiled down to is we ended up implementing the platform in ArcGIS as an ArcGIS experience builder app, which worked pretty well. It's not very flexible in some ways, but it does have this neat feature called lists, which allows you to iterate through a spreadsheet and dump the data onto the screen in a configurable way. And so each of these tiles is an element in a list. And you can see the spreadsheet down below the drives, what you're seeing on the tiles. So basically, we collect all this metadata in the spreadsheet, upload the spreadsheet to ArcGIS Online, and it automatically populates the tiles. So the update process is pretty easy. It's just, of course, producing the data itself and the images still takes some time. All right. So what's next? We're launching phase 2 development on insights. So in this phase, we have relaxed that the no new data constraint. We're allowing new data. We are still keeping the no new tools constraint. The focus is going to be on comparing geographies in the MORPC region to one another. So comparing Franklin County to Delaware County or Dublin, Ohio to Westerville, Ohio, things like that. And also to compare the Columbus Metro to other US metros. As a test of that latter thing, comparing the metros, we're going to work with the Columbus Foundation, which is a large local charitable organization, to take the contents of their Benchmarking Central Ohio report and feature some of those elements in this platform. And that many of those comparisons are interregional. So that's what's driving us to allow those comparisons in the platform. To that end, we got a grant from the Columbus Foundation of $55K. So we'll either be hiring an intern or a contractor, a TBD, to help us out with this. And then finally, once we have all this new great data from the Columbus Foundation in there, hopefully we can update our NNIP data inventory and get a little bit higher SNP score on our next check-in. And that's all I have. Hopefully I didn't go too long. If you'd like to check out the platform, you can see the link here and the QR code. Feel free to check it out, and we'd love to know what you hear what you think about it. That's all I have.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, there may be a new SNP score champion next year. We'll see. Okay, well, just in the interest of time, to make sure we finish by the hour and have enough time for everyone. If people have questions, we can do like one, maybe two. But if people have more, definitely feel free to put them in the chat also. But any questions for right now?
Just Adam, thank you for the presentation. And you said it's for Congress people to make informed decisions. Are you seeing some of that already? I mean, any example that you want to share of how the data's been used? The tiles, it's a beautiful name. First time I hear it, so thank you.
Thank you. Well, first, let me clarify. Although we would certainly love it if Congress people were using this, our audience is really more of the local county commissioners, mayors, township trustees, those folks. So a little bit lower level government. In terms of what they're using, I can't cite a specific case where this resulted in a particular policy change, for example, but this image you see right here tends to be, it's requested a lot by MORPC leadership and shared with member communities. Housing price is a big concern here, as it is all over the country. And being able to, put a couple of these charts side by side, I think has been really impactful for our local leaders, and just understanding, how their community compares to the county, how things have been trending over time. So I think this tile in particular has been impactful, although I can't say that this specifically has been responsible for any change.
I want to do like one shout out other than just like awesome job. Like I think this is really cool and really does something that I thought about for a long time in previous roles in terms of that sort of idea of having a newspaper kind of thing. And then I also just uh want to recognize something that is like vital in my new role, which is using and flexing the tools and resources that you have. I love the idea of like no new tools, no new data. Like what can we do with what we have and achieve a particular goal, which was to provide value to your member organizations. How can we provide value, and how do we do it without sort of without adding new data, without adding new tools. Like let's lift up the things we have, make them available, add value in this way. Let's use also, that, you built it in an Esri product and you pointed out like there are some things you don't like about it. There's some things that are cool, but like recognizing that like this is the thing we have and we pay for and we should use it to its fullest. And I think that's great. And I just want to champion that. And thank you again for sharing it.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. You really nailed it. In fact, I kind of wish I'd let you present that slide. That sounded great.
All right. Well, yeah, if people have other questions or comments, definitely put in the chat. But thank you, Adam. I think we'll just go ahead and move to Blaine and Sarah J.
Thank you, Cole. Let me go ahead and share my screen. My name is Sarah J. Sanford. I'm an epidemiologist at Public Health Seattle and King County, which is kind of the organizational home for Communities Count. Can folks see my slides all right?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Blaine, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, folks. My name is Blaine Amson, pronouns he, him, his, and I am the ADA and Disability Equity Program Manager working with Sarah J. in public health. Great to be here.
Thank you, Blaine. And Mariko, she's not going to be presenting much because we thought she wasn't going to be available this morning, but would you like to come off mute and say hi?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, East Coast, Midwestern friends here. My name is Mariko Toyoji. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an epidemiologist at Public Health Seattle King County with Sarah J., where we help staff communities count. So I'm here more to cheer folks on. Originally, I had a scheduling conflict, but I can join now. But I'm excited for Blaine to be joining us from our public health department. And yeah, take it away, Sarah J. and Blaine.
All right. I'm probably set up a little bit too much for myself to cover this morning, so I'm gonna keep it moving, but please put questions in the chat, or especially Blaine and Mariko, feel free to come off mute and just interrupt me any moment. So a super brief introduction to Communities Count. We are a local data intermediary for Seattle and King County. We serve a population of about 2.4 million in a county that covers a geography a little bit bigger than Delaware or Rhode Island. Check us out at communitiescount.org. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about our disability equity journey. And essentially how this has come about for us at this moment was we decided to work on a blog about the data that we have related to disability in King County. And we knew that we wanted to partner with someone on that blog who could bring a strong disability justice perspective. We have this phrase that we've actually used for a long time, no data about us without us, that we think of as like a a data equity principle that we strive for. But as Blaine pointed out, the origin of this is a riff on the phrase nothing about us without us, which is deeply associated with grassroots disability rights movement in the US. So we decided to write this blog. We set out to partner. We are really lucky in the health department to have Blaine, who's our American with Disabilities Act and Disability Equity Program Manager, to support us. And basically what I'm going to share today is very slightly repackaged suggestions and guidance that he gave us as we worked on this blog. And I want to be sure to take a moment just not to frame myself as an expert at all. I'm very much learning as I go, as are we all. Nor do I want to position communities count as a model. We're starting with where we are, which is something that any of us can do. So rather than saying, okay, here's how to do everything, I'm just going to share a little bit of what we're learning, the expertise Blaine has shared, and I've included some kind of questions and resources for reflections to hopefully help you make connections to your own work. All right, so this first piece of advice was use and define the word ableism, discrimination or bias against people with disabilities, because naming this helps readers understand the why behind the disparities that our data typically show. Noting that these also are deeply intertwined with other drivers of disparities like poverty. But naming ableism allows us to see what systems withhold economic opportunities from people with disabilities, or who are transportation systems designed for. So an example is in our blog, we state these patterns reflect ableism, discrimination, or bias against people with disabilities, which can show up in policies, workplaces, health systems, and public spaces, and even how we collect, analyze, and share data. So on that note, the first few slides I'm going to share are a little bit more general, and then I am going to dive into a little bit more of the data nerd specific stuff that we worked on together. All right, next item, use plain language. I know this is something we all might think about in multiple different contexts, but it's really important to think about from a disability equity perspective as well. Because when we write about people with disabilities, the writing itself should be accessible to people with disabilities, including those with intellectual or developmental disabilities, brain injuries, psychiatric disabilities, and those using screen readers. I want to say that for me, I think of this as like another variation of the classic curb cut analogy, where doing something to specifically support accessibility for one group benefits so many more. Plain language really makes your work more accessible to everybody, and it's an essential starting point for good translation when we think about language access as well. So here's just one example of language that we changed in our blog. The disability community is complex and includes physical, cognitive, emotional, psychiatric, and/or sensory conditions that can present as limitations. And Blaine helped us rewrite this. To disability can affect how people move, think, feel, or communicate. People experience disability in many ways. Barriers in the world, like inaccessible buildings or information, can make those experiences harder. And I've linked just one resource that I like about plain language. There's many more out there. All right, let me make sure I can see the chat real quick. All right, next suggestion Blaine shared was to define disability without deficit language, because focusing on limitations without naming the external barriers can suggest that the person is the problem, whereas a disability equity frame invites readers to see how systems and environments can disable people. So for example, disability is not only about a diagnosis. People are disabled by barriers in the world around them, like stairs without ramps, websites that don't work with screen readers, or health systems that don't offer accommodations. Next is framing disability as a civil rights issue rather than an individual limitation or deficit or a medical issue. And this is really helpful for readers to understand that barriers are in the systems and environments, not in people, like we just discussed, and that these disparities reflect our collective failure to provide access equitably to people with disabilities. And I've named here a couple specific laws that were passed after much, much, much activism by disability rights activists, by disabled folks, including ADA and Section 504, which is for public education. And I also linked an article that I really enjoyed about the connections between the disability rights and racial justice movements. Now I'm going to dig a little bit more into some data-specific considerations. And I'll be using as examples some of our data that I think are sources probably familiar to many of you. But one place we get a lot of our data about like prevalence of disability in King County come from the American Community Survey or behavioral risk factor surveillance systems. And both of these ask fairly similar questions that name 6 different specific forms of disability, but these are limited. They are defined by ableist definitions of what a disability or a disabled person is. And they likely represent an undercount because of these limitations in the definition, and as well stigma related to having a disability. So folks may not choose to disclose on these, large government surveys. Here locally in King County, we actually see really different prevalence levels from these 2 data sources that ask similar questions. So I think that speaks to how much the format of the survey itself and how the sampling works impact the numbers that we see there. So we know there's limitations, and if you don't state these limitations, it can really impact how both you and your data users interpret data related to disability. On a related note, communication access also impacts who can participate in these data collection processes. So this communications access, when I say that, I mean making information accessible so that people with disabilities can participate, whether it be surveys and other forms of public engagement. But I've worked with our state's BRFIS team a bit, and I suspect that because this is a resource that's managed on a state-by-state level, the way they focus on accessibility probably varies quite a bit from state to state. And even if they say, BRFIS is a phone survey, there is a TTY option, simply having that option doesn't mean that that isn't a further barrier to participation. So I encourage you to really think critically about the way that data collection happens in different data sources that you're using and how that might impact who participates and how people with disabilities are represented in those data sources. Next, give context for place-based differences. I think this is something that we see all the time in working with neighborhood level data, but it's important to state that these differences by place reflect unequal access to resources like healthcare, housing, transportation, and other amenities. Don't want to give it short shrift, but I want to make sure I cover our last note here that, again, I think is really important to think through specific to data sources you might be working with is how people living in institutional or congregate settings might be included or not included. People living in all kinds of different congregate settings from nursing homes, group homes, or jails are often excluded from both data and public narrative. For example, the behavioral risk factor surveillance system doesn't include any of those congregate settings. And again, this can really impact both what you see in the data and how you interpret it. So it's important to keep that in mind, as well as to be transparent with your data users about it. So that's a little bit now. We are working on a part 2 of the blog to come out later this year. We're updating our style guide, taking in some of this feedback that Blaine has provided us. And, I've just listed here a few other steps that we hope to be working on as we continue along our disability equity journey and I don't know how I'm doing on time. I feel like I talked a lot really fast, and I would love to invite Blaine and Mariko to also chime in and let me know if you want me to hop around the slides at all.
Really, I just want to say thank you to you both for, being brave and stepping into leading this conversation as learners. To move from, learning to immediately presenting can be a scary space, and I appreciate and I see you stepping into that space. So I'm very grateful for that. I also, although it's touched on a little bit, I also just want to really point out the intersections of identity, right? So that people with disabilities are not just one thing. And when you look at the communities count data, what you see is that folks of color, folks who are LGBTQIA, are more deeply impacted by the inequities that happen here. So when you solve for one group, you're often solving for the other. And it really does speak to that curb cut analogy and that kind of we're all in this together. And so it's really important that when you're centering conversations of racism, queer bias, that sort of thing, that you're also thinking about how are we building this so that it's accessible? Because when you are working to be anti-racist, you are also inherently working to be anti-ableist. And if you're not having that explicit conversation, you're doing it wrong. Thank you so much. Just my opinion. You're doing it wrong. Thank you so much for the moment on the mic.
And I just want to acknowledge and thank Blaine so much for his expertise and labor and working with us on the blog and the framing and the language. It's been so impactful, I think, for us as a team and in our wider work group too, in our unit at the health department. Even this blog has kind of created some conversations around disability equity and what more we could be doing with our data that I don't know would have happened otherwise, or it was kind of a push with some other things going on too. So I think that this has really kind of created some momentum that's really, really exciting to see behind more work on improving the data that we do have on disability in our local community. So again, it's such an important issue, and we're kind of just starting our journey, but really thank Blaine for partnering with us and being a part of that and helping us along that way.
Yeah, thank you so much to all three of you. This is really cool. So I just want to make sure we get to the next presentation on time, but we have time for maybe one question, and then if people have more, feel free to put them in the chat.
Also, I think, I know since we're so short, just if you want to drop us a note, I know this is building off of webinar from last year too, that I can remind people about. So if people are interested in a separate conversation about any aspect of this, we could host that too, like for small folks who are interested in this.
Yes, and you know what? Thank you to NNIP for that webinar, because that helped us kind of plant a seed when we were thinking of blog ideas. Actually, that was right around that. We had shortly after seeing that webinar. So thank you all for creating that, and planting that seed for us.
In place of a question, let me say one last thing. Those emails that you see on the screen, please do, if you have more questions, if you want to continue to engage, I'm all about changing the world. And so please reach out to any of those folks, and they know how to get in touch with me. If you want to talk more about what this looks like, like I love seeing these things ripple out. So connect, please do.
Absolutely. Okay, well, yeah, definitely put more questions in the chat, but I think just in the interest of time, we'll go ahead and move on to Francisca.
All right, thank you, NNIP, for giving me the chance to just give you a very brief introduction. I will be checking my time so that I don't go beyond my 10 minutes. So let me see, slideshow over here. All right, starting with a very simple equation, the only one you will see. Assumptions plus data lead to conclusions. And we call data, like data science, right? Data science, big data, data analytics. But we don't think, or maybe some of us don't think too much about the assumptions that, together with the data, lead to conclusions in social policy and anything that has to do really with data generated in a social context. So thanks to Kathy for being an advisor in this project, and I, with my colleagues, are in Cleveland at the Center on Poverty and Community Development at Case Western Reserve University. We at the Poverty Center use data to equip communities with informed data analytics needed for them to guide their work. So communities, meaning local governments, community organizations, sometimes larger, like we've done projects for HUD, for instance, as well. But what is an integrated data system? This is the integrated longitudinal data system that we hold representing children and households. We call it CHILD for short. Is this very careful linked at the individual level into data system. And so as you can see here, we have a number of agencies, offices that through 30 years of my colleagues developing trusted relationships allow us to bring in that data, link it under a very secured research environment, and then use it, again, doing analysis within this secured environment, use it to inform social good. And I bring Charles Mansky's equation again here because as much as we have been very careful in doing rigorous data analysis and in a very careful and secured way that protects the privacy of individuals, I think after 2020, we decided to pay more attention to the assumptions that accompany these data analytics. As Mansky mentions, there's this law of decreasing credibility. The stronger our assumptions are, then the less credible are our conclusions. And so we ask, whose assumptions are these, right? Is it always a lit review? Is it always the scientific community or data analysts? And to what extent those, statistics, econometrics, methodologies kind of ignore the underlying assumptions from people represented in the data, right? So the idea of, here's a very quick example of why this matters, why sketching things in a way that democratizes the way in which we all think about what is a data generating process that, ends up informing social policy and the data that we see, who's represented in the data, who isn't. All this is important, and we use causal graphs as well to bring that to bear. This is just one quick example, and we're not going to go into it, but you'll have a chance seeing. The reason why I wanted to share this is because we have these beautiful educational modules for all of us are learners, to continue making sure that we bring the assumptions of the insights of people represented in the data to inform data analytics. So again, how do we do that without requiring everyone to be a data scientist or data analyst? And some of it is through causal graphs. So in this case, this is a low birth weight paradox, a paradox that kind of surprised researchers and wasn't uncovered until very late, in the 1960s. You might have seen some of those advertisements about if a woman while pregnant smokes, then they'll have a better pregnancy outcome. And so even though there was this hypothesis that smoking causes low birth weight and low birth weight causes higher risk of infant mortality, researchers noted that among infants of low birth weight, infant mortality was lower for infants born to parents who smoked, which was, didn't make sense, right? Thanks to advances in the use of causal graphs, we can see that, again, this is a very democratic way of showing that smoking causes low birth weight, and it also causes a higher risk of infant mortality. But if we are only going to use data on infants with low birth weight, then there's other risk factors that might contribute to that might be much more severe. And so once we select data of low infant birth weights, then smoking is a lesser risk factor, right? We use these graphs because they are part of the assumptions that accompany data and data analytics, and are a good way to uncover biases in the data. So that's just one example. And I'll skip this. But overall, we decided if we are going to use integrated data systems in a way where people's experiences, especially those marginalized, inform the way we do data analytics, we need a framework. And so in addition to the framework of FAIR, the standards of verification for data, we added a second set of principles that imply framing, the F standing for framing the metadata and data with the historical context and experiential knowledge of those represented in the data. Articulating that information into causal graphs that are a little bit more complex, nuanced than the ones we just saw, so as to make sure that this informs the data analytics. Go through a series of basically steps to identify biases in the data, collider bias, label bias, a number of those, especially those that impact our interpretation of results relative to marginalized populations, and always make sure to report back to people represented in the data that are the main stakeholders of our work. So this is just an example of how we actually did work on a project using infant data, birth certificate data, and we used actually the literature to tap onto the ways by which discrimination can impact infant vitality. And that helped us analyze the data in a very, very different way and learn and interpret results in a way that highlighted that education is not just a pathway to better education of parents is not a pathway to better infant health because mothers are more educated, but rather because they have access to maybe better employment that allow them to take the time off for a medical visit. So again, blending in the qualitative knowledge of people represented in the data definitely helped us inform the data analytics. Here's another example where we before holding a conference on employee and public interest technologies to promote access for people with disabilities, we invited people with mobility challenges to help us understand what was important to them, so that when researchers came to the conference, we kept the insights of people with disabilities in mind. We translated those into these causal graphs about what causes mobility access and what are the consequences of mobility access. And so these are just some of the forms that we are, some of the tools that we're using to, let me see, change my share now. Oh yes, are you all seeing then the FAIR2 website?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, great. So this is where the teaching materials and modules lie, and I would love for anyone that's interested to take a look. We become familiar with the FAIR2 framework here. There's a video, slide presentation, so with voice, but then if you also just want to see the slide presentation, you see it here. The way in which you use data chats, like the one I just shared, to understand how to harmonize race and gender in integrated data so that it represents the beautiful diversity of identities without, again, compromising the privacy of individuals in the data. We go use causal graphs to have learners become familiar with label bias and collider bias, which is very, very typical of using administrative data. And then recommendations for social change. If one has become familiar with these ideas but is still not sure how to implement them in the data analytic process, then this is brings it home. So there's simulations here, and this also takes you to the first website where we spent a little bit more time talking about data chats and the framework, which again, data chats is a great idea that we learned from our NNIP partners. So again, this is a resource that I'd love for you to check out and provide feedback, because we want not just students, college students, but rather any data analyst to see if this actually makes the way in which data analytics is performed more a driver of social justice and more diversity.
All right, thank you so much, Francisca. And yeah, as Kathy said in the chat, we're holding a consultative session next Tuesday for people to provide feedback on this curriculum. And Leah, I know, is running the recording and has to go right at 2. So if people have questions, they can stick around. We can do those. We may not be able to record them. But otherwise, we will send up a follow-up note with all of the email addresses of the speakers for people to email them questions as well.
I think it might just switch to you, Cole, so we'll try it.
Okay. Yeah, we'll see.
I put the link of the website in the chat if people want to copy that.
Great, thanks. So yeah, I know people probably have to go, but any final questions for Francisca before we close? Well, if not, we're having that session next Tuesday, so be on the lookout for that as well. But otherwise, thank you so much to everybody for joining, and to all of our speakers. This is really great. All these were so informative. So I'll go ahead and end the session.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
Thank
This was
you.
great food for thought.
Thanks.